along the shore. There's a lot of people, right? Thousands and thousands of people going like ants crawling along the shore going, oh my, oh my, oh my. And so he's on this mountain, he's teaching his disciples, and they start showing up there. They catch up to him finally. Of course, the boat moves faster than the people along the shore. So they catch up to him, and his concern is, oh, they're going to be hungry. These people are going to be hungry. They're out there. They're poor people anywhere. It's going to be a problem to be out in this countryside with little food around or anything to help these people with. And so anyway, when I hear this story, I can't help but think of what happened with Moses. He's pulling on Moses themes all throughout here. One of the first things we read here is that it was near the Passover where Moses led the people out of Egypt into the wilderness, that whole thing, that they freed the people from their bondage in Egypt. And then it mentions him going up a mountain, right? Moses goes up a mountain. And now he's with this huge crowd of hungry people out in the wilderness, another Moses thing. So they're kind of working Jesus with this Moses theme, a leader of God's people who spoke for God for them. And so what's he going to do? He's got his crowd. Moses fed the people in the wilderness, right? He pled with God to bring them down manna so they could have something to eat every day. They were very grumpy out there because that's what hunger does. It makes us grumpy. And so he doesn't want that either. And so he turns to one of his disciples, Philip, and he says, where are we going to get food to feed all these people? Yeah, now, I think that is a question that has no good answer. Because even if they were in Jerusalem, thousands of people would have been tough to come up with enough food to feed them there, let alone out in the countryside. Of course, there's no place to have food out there either. It wasn't for Moses as far as that goes either. So what are we going to do? And Philip's response is, man, 200 denarii, which is 200 days of work. A denarii is about a day's wage. So 200 days of wages wouldn't be enough to give them each a bite. So not only do we not have a place to feed them, we don't have any money to pay for what it takes to feed them. Problem. It said Jesus did ask him this to test him. I don't think Philip passed that test. Just thinking. I think he didn't get there. So we have them out in the wilderness. They're getting hungry. And what are we going to do about that, of course? Then Andrew shows up and says, well, we got this boy. And he has 5 loaves and 2 fish. And of course, Andrew comments, what's that among so many people? It's nothing. And Jesus takes them, these 5 loaves and 2 fish. In the other Gospels, this story is in all the Gospels, it says he blesses them. And I like that part of it because it invokes God doing something good through something. That's what we do when we bless someone, that God is going to do something good through them or through that thing. And so he blesses the food, and he starts handing it out. Of course, the food multiplies and multiplies somehow, and all these people get fed. These fish and these 5 loaves and 2 fish are enough to feed this huge multitude, and they're taken care of. In fact, it was such a deal that at the end he says, well, gather up what's left over of the bread anyway and see what we've got. And they gather it all up because he doesn't want anything lost, doesn't want to waste it. Food is holy, food is precious. And he has 12 baskets full, which is saying what? The life he gives, the love he gives often is abundant. It's interesting, a few chapters before this, he turned all that water, like almost 200 gallons of water into wine. It's a lot of wine. And now he's doing this one with the bread. So we got the bread abundance. Now we got the wine abundance. Little theme going on there maybe. I don't know. So anyway, so he's got this huge abundance. But the people misperceive this, some of them. They say, well, he's a prophet. He's like Moses, obviously. And they want to make him king. Jesus fears this. They're going to force him to be king. Why would they do that? Well, they're thinking about themselves. Right? Think, this guy can pull this miracle out. He can pull a whole bunch of miracles out. Wouldn't that be a good deal? And we might quickly want to judge them on that, but it's pretty easy to slide into kind of a selfish relationship with God, especially when we're hurting. It's a real easy slide. It's like, God, you need to give me this. God, you got to fix that in my life. God, I need this. Please, God, give me. It's really easy to get there, and we forget that as much as Jesus cares about us and can do things in our lives, that ultimately Jesus wants us to take that next step. Talked about it last week, of following him and becoming the life-giving love to other people. Live a love that's life-giving to other people. Not just get it, but let it go through you to other people. And I think we have a clue here in our gospel reading of a little bit of what that might look like for you in your lives. And that is, Jesus takes a little bit and makes a lot of it. And does this great life-giving work of feeding people, hungry people. He takes a little bit and makes it a lot. And at first we say, well, I can't do that miraculously. We get that. But almost all the big things we do as God's people started as a little bit, like an idea. Like an idea. So I was walking to church today, and they had the picture out of Ascension when it was just started. It's right in the Welcome Center there. You can look at it. And there our little church sits out on the prairie on the north end of town here. That takes you back 70 years, I'm telling you. But this church, when it was first built, this first part of it is in the prairie on the north end of town. And how did that start? Someone had an idea to say, we need to build a church here. We need to get something started. It just started with an idea as a little thing. And they got some people around and got them interested, and pretty soon it grew. And the idea turned into people saying, hey, I'd donate towards that. I'd support that. I'd do some work for that. And it comes together, and then they start getting plans and building, and this idea becomes a church. You know, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is like a seed. The smallest little thing. Goes in the ground and becomes a big bush, he said. And it starts small. Things start small all the time. It always does. Had a great example of that this week. So this gets a little confusing, but follow me. So there is a church. Our church partner in Castle Rock is named Well of Hope Lutheran Church. It's a startup. They don't have a building. There's like 30 people meet a Sunday for Well of Hope. So just, they're trying to get going. They have a pastor. And as you can imagine, they don't have any extra money to give away or do anything, benevolent out there to make any difference. But the pastor and the congregation came up with an idea. That maybe they could, if they they didn't have the money from themselves, that they could put on a fundraiser to raise the money out there. And they had a connection with the Bubbles liquor store. And Bubbles liquor store said, we'll help you put on a wine tasting event. There's an idea. A wine tasting event. And they have a cause. The cause they want to start this for is for New Beginnings Lutheran Church. Now, you probably never heard of New Beginnings because it's in our Denver Women's Correctional Facility. We have a Lutheran church functioning there. I don't know if you knew that. But the women there actually have called a pastor. They have congregational meetings. They have all this sort of thing, but they don't have much money, so they're going to depend on generous donors like people like Well of Hope putting on a fundraiser for them. And so that's where they said they're going to bring this money to. The Episcopal Church heard about it in Castle Rock, and they said, okay, you can use our space to have this fundraiser. Well, they had one more problem. Again, they don't have any money at Well of Hope either, and they're saying, we need to have food for this thing. We don't have money for food. What can we do? And then one of these Synod staff members, someone like Mary Stonebeck, shows up and says, why don't you talk to Ascension? So he calls Ascension, and you know what? We just this year started a fund, Ascension Impacting Mission Fund, and we got a bunch of money in that fund. That this is a fund that we're going to use all that money to impact mission somewhere, and we get this call and we think, man, these guys are doing exactly what we wanted to do with this fund. Impact mission. And so we funded the food for this little church that just had its idea, that somehow got a liquor store to jump on board. They were connected to the Episcopal Church up there, which had a nice facility, and we who have this Ascension Mission Fund, and all of a sudden they have this huge fundraiser. I think Jim was there yesterday, weren't you? Did it go well? I haven't heard. It happened yesterday, so this is all recent, and they raised money for a church. Love, right? Given in life-giving ways, especially for those who are hurting and in need. That's our Lord Jesus, isn't it? That's what we want to be about. And we just tag along. We threw a few of the loaves in there on the deal and watch them make the big thing happen. And isn't that cool? So this week I want to challenge you to think of your lives this way. We can get worried about God and get in a relationship with God where we're always trying to get something from God. But switch it around a little bit and think, what can I do? What little bit do I have that I could do some good for? Maybe it's make a phone call or send a card. Maybe it's help somebody out. Maybe it's bring a gift to somebody, who knows. Maybe it's coming up with an idea that can leverage to do something even more than you might have imagined. This little well of hope went way beyond their weight, 30 people to make that much money for this church. Pretty powerful stuff. That we too are people with ideas and little bits to use and love in life-giving ways. Amen.